Great. Thank you for that, Karen. Very good afternoon to all of you and a very warm welcome to this virtual Resilience Hub event jointly hosted by the Climate Development Knowledge Network, the Resilience Knowledge Coalition, and the Adaptation Research Alliance. Three salient initiatives working to ensure that knowledge is used for transformative action in the context of climate and development. We have an action-packed session for you. We're going to have virtual speakers, physical speakers, lightning talks, hard talk, a film, a PowerPoint presentation, closing remarks. So brace yourself, buckle up. It's going to be a wild ride for the next 90 minutes. Now that I've raised your expectations sky high, I am going to request Dr. Shahnaz Musa, who leads the Climate and Development Knowledge Network, to come online and give us her opening remarks. Dr. Musa, I don't know if you can hear me, but if you can, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Aditya. And like you say, I hope everyone's seatbelt is buckled up because it's going to be quite an exciting event. So warm greetings to all of you. My name is Shahnaz Musa, and I'm the director of the Climate and Development Knowledge Network and South North, which is an NPO that is based in Cape Town, South Africa. It is with great pleasure that I welcome you today on behalf of three global initiatives: CDKN, the Adaptation Research Alliance, and the Resilience Knowledge Coalition, global networks with a common mission to ensure adaptation and resilience knowledge leads to action on climate change. Aditya Bahadur from IIED and a member of the ARA Secretariat will be your host for this ride in Glasgow and lead you through the session. Please do be patient with us as we navigate this hybrid, virtual and face-to-face event. Today, we are joined by representatives of three initiatives, and we are also deeply grateful that we have three climate leaders from Ethiopia, Kenya, and Bangladesh with you in Glasgow, who are working from grassroots to national levels to support climate action on the ground. Through this event, we would like to explore the value of partnerships and networks, particularly in facilitating knowledge into action. None of us can work in isolation, given the scale of the climate challenge and the urgency in which we need to act. And if we consider the knowledge challenge just for a minute, we know that governments, communities, the private sector, and others are eager for actionable information and practical solutions for building climate resilience, for sharing lessons of what has and has not worked. We know that the adaptation research community is not sufficiently connected to those on the front lines, the communities and grassroots organizations, governments and businesses. And we know that no one actor or organization has all the needed skills, knowledge, assets, and connections to build resilience. We need to collaborate and learn from each other to be effective and to innovate. Today, we are also pleased to share with you a new digibook co-produced through collaboration between ICAD, CDKN, and GRP as co-leads of the Resilience Knowledge Coalition. By working together, we have been able to share with a global audience the voices of those working on the front line responding to COVID-19. This digibook shares a collection of over 50 stories from communities across Asia and the Pacific, Africa, and Latin America, and indeed hundreds of community voices from around the world of how they are helping each other to deal with COVID-19, the climate crisis, and many other issues. They have a lot to tell the rest of the world about what resilience looks like and how people in partnership, led by community priorities, can re-establish progress on the SDGs. We are also very pleased to celebrate the launch of the Adaptation Research Alliance at the Resilience Hub today. After a very successful high-level launch event yesterday, the ARA is a growing community of close to 100 organizations focused on driving action-orientated research on adaptation for achieving transformative change. More than half of these partners are from the global south, or the majority world. ARA members have spent the last year co-creating the Alliance, and CDKN and the Resilience Knowledge Coalition are proud to be part of this collaborative process into the future. With this, I wish you all a good event, and I'm going to hand back to Aditya Bahadur. Over to you, Aditya.
Thank you, Dr. Musa. Really apt and insightful remarks. I should have combed the back of my head. I didn't realize there was a camera right here. Thank you for your remarks. So as you've been able to tell, these are three highly complementary initiatives, all undertaking activities to help ensure that knowledge informs action. Now we're going to have three lengthy 100-slide present. No, I'm joking. 3 4-minute interventions from people representing each of these three initiatives, who are going to demonstrate to you in 4 minutes. I'm saying that again so they can listen to me on what these initiatives do, how they're going to convert knowledge into action, and how all of you sitting in the room with us and listening in online can join and support these activities. I'm going to turn first to Shuchi Vora, who works with the Resilience Knowledge Coalition. Shuchi, I hope you're online and you can hear me.
Yes, I can, Aditya.
Great, the floor is yours for 4 minutes.
Thank you. It's strange to be sitting in the comforts of my home and talking to a crowd in Glasgow. Hi, everyone. Good evening. I'm from India. Nice for you all to see me. I'm not able to see you. I'm able to see myself here on the screen. But I am the coordinator of the Resilience Knowledge Coalition, and I'm going to talk about the facilitation of knowledge into action through the Resilience Knowledge Coalition and the value of partnerships between CDKN, ARA, ACAD, GRP to form the coalition, essentially. To start off, Shahnaz has given a great context, but I'll delve a little further into the fact that we're talking about climate change here, which is a wicked problem in itself. And we add to that chronic stresses on our infrastructure, health systems, economic systems, so on and so forth. And also regular shocks like pandemics, the COVID-19 pandemic, economic shocks, etc. And this just creates this whole melting pot of risks and issues that communities, especially on the front lines, have to face, but all of us face together as humanity. And in order to deal with this, we need to arrive at systemic solutions, and we all know that. We all have a growing wealth of evidence with each of these individual alliances, networks, initiatives that you will hear about today and more, and you've been hearing about through the Resilience Hub as well. But there is a need for knowledge brokering between these networks, and that's a gap that the Resilience Knowledge Coalition tries to address in order to create a whole that is larger than the sum of its parts. The coalition, as I mentioned, is a network of networks. It's an individual membership network that connects various different initiatives, networks, alliances, communities of practice, and currently has 450 plus individual members. It's fairly easy to join. You can click on a link and fill in your name and email ID, and you're on it. And it's hosted by GRP, co-hosted by CDKN and ACAD, and partners with a host of different communities of practice and which focus on various aspects of adaptation and resilience. The purpose of the coalition is to get knowledge used so that policies, plans, and investments are shaped in order to deliver a resilient future. And we do that through 3 key buckets of activities. The first one is collaborate, where we want to create a vibrant community of practice through peer-to-peer learning, networking, and capacity exchange. We have a host of different activities. You shall hear about a few of them through the course of the event, like Voices from the Frontline and Catalytic Grants. But we also have the Global South Talent Pool, the Global South Expert Pool, etc. And each of these activities have sort of culminated and come together, and each of these roles have sort of come together as the coalition has taken on the role of the cross-cutting champion for knowledge at the Resilience Hub, where we are facilitating a host of different cross-cutting themes and pillars into how knowledge can be driven into action. And that's been an exciting space, and the whole 450 odd members have come together to deliver that. The second key bucket of activities or function is the Connect function, where we have a curated knowledge management system called the Resilience Platform. And we're connecting this with dynamically linking this with a host of different platforms like We Adapt, Prevention Web, etc., through a tool where we'd like this to become a repository of comprehensive repository of all climate adaptation and resilience knowledge that exists. And the third function is Apply, where we have two key pathways of facilitating this knowledge that sits and acting as a bridge between knowledge and practice, or knowledge and investments. So the first one is measurements, evaluation, and learning. Here, a key role that the Resilience Knowledge Coalition is playing is as a transformational knowledge partner with the Race to Resilience campaign, where it is supported the campaign's metrics framework with capacity exchange, knowledge brokering, and amplification of existing measurements, evaluation, and learning knowledge. And the other pathway is incubation, acceleration, and scaling. Here we are providing matchmaking, deal brokering, and incubation services to surface and scale innovative resilience solutions, predominantly from the Global South, through an array of tools like leadership academies, investor forums, much like the one that some of you may have attended a week back actually, at the Resilience Hub, here right at the Resilience Hub. And with this, this is just like a glimpse of the Resilience Hub, the Resilience Knowledge Coalition, sorry. And with this, I'd just like to end with a few points. The coalition is striving to adopt a learning by doing approach. So in that, it's learning as we go along, and then it's putting the spotlight squarely on expertise in the Global South, acknowledging the fact that there is a wide range and diversity of expertise in the Global South, and surfacing that. And finally, it's adding value to the great work that's already being done, not trying to replicate, not trying to add one more initiative in the host of work that already exists. Great. With that, I'd like to hand over back to Aditya. Thank you.
Thank you, Shuchi. That was really clear, really compelling. I have one bonus question for you. What do you think are the complementarities between CDKN, RKC, and ARA? And can all of us play nice?
Do you want me to answer this right away? It could take the whole session.
You have another 40 seconds.
Right. So thanks for that question. I think we all come with very clear strengths. ARA is a formal network which has a very structured approach to action research, and it's trying to bridge that gap between research and practice. The Resilience Knowledge Coalition is essentially trying to bridge gaps between networks, and therefore trying to act as that link or trying to act as that bridging point between various networks. And CDKN's strength has been the front lines and connecting with the grassroots. And I think,
Great.
yeah, we all can play nice. We have been playing nice. We've done this event together. We've been working together, doing workshops together. And CDKN is a co-lead for the coalition. So technically part of the coalition. CDKN is also part of ARA through South-South-North. So there's definitely that amalgamation of all that rich collective wisdom that we all have. And I see a great potential for the kind of work that we can do together.
And yes, of course, that was the leading question, because as a member of the ARA Secretariat myself, we have a lot to thank the RKC for, and I'm sure Jesse will raise that point as well. You really helped us think through many of our aspects of our governance, and you helped convene a workshop that helped define our knowledge and learning approach. So Shuchi, a huge thanks to you. I'm going to turn now to Lisa Mcnamara from the Climate Development Knowledge Network. Lisa, are you online, and can you hear us?
I am online, and I hope that you can hear me.
Yes, we can hear you loud and clear. The floor is yours for 4 minutes.
Correct. Thank you. I also have the same experience as Suchi, looking at myself from afar down in Glasgow. So I'm just going to do a nice little lightning introduction of CDKN and our work and our approach. And hopefully Aditya won't give me lots of difficult questions at the end. So it's really a great pleasure to be here sharing and this platform with 3 wonderful initiatives, and really exciting to be doing so. And I'm going to be talking a little bit about CDKN's learning as well over the last 12 years. We've been working for 12 years as a program. And I'm based at South-South-North in Cape Town, which leads the management of CDKN. And CDKN works in Asia, Africa, and Latin America. We're a partnership of Southern-based organizations in India, South Africa, Ecuador, and the United Kingdom, and with the support of Canada's International Development Research Centre and the Dutch Ministry of Foreign Affairs. And our approach is really to tailor knowledge in response to needs articulated by our partners in countries. And we really focused on trying to support locally owned and locally managed processes. We have a specific focus on also trying to support collaboration and learning amongst peers and peer learning, so sharing of experience-based knowledge as opposed to just expert-based knowledge. And we also increasingly focused on trying to work with climate leaders and champions to run their own processes and change processes in developing countries. And we seek to partner in everything we do, so hence working with the GRP and ICAD in co-leading the Resilience Knowledge Coalition, and now proud members of the Adaptation Research Alliance. And we work from local to national levels. We have 10 focal countries where we lead sort of deep engagement in those countries, and national country engagement leaders are there to really scope out and design our programs in response to specific knowledge needs articulated by our partners. And we have our Ethiopia country engagement lead with you in Glasgow, and he'll talk a bit more about the work in Ethiopia, Robbie Redder. And so we've learned a bit over 12 years of how to support knowledge into action in countries, and there's a lot to cover, so 4 minutes is not going to do it justice, but I'm just going to give 4 top line lessons that we've taken from working in this arena. The first being that local knowledge brokering really needs to be locally led, and that sounds obvious and intuitive, but I'm not sure if we think about it enough. Really, grassroots leaders and community leaders are on the front lines, and they are really central role players in brokering knowledge for resilience. And this has been powerfully demonstrated during COVID. Shanaz mentioned the digibook we've launched today on voices from the front line of COVID-19, what their stories of resilience mean for achieving the SDGs at community level. And it's been amazing how grassroots organizations, women's organizations have played a pivotal role in sharing information on the pandemic, from organizing countering fake news, misinformation, organizing communication technology to share information, collecting data from vulnerable households to identify who to target in neighborhoods for assistance, and the list goes on. So this really has been a powerful demonstration of the need to work with local community leaders and empower them to do this knowledge brokering role. And the second lesson really has been that knowledge brokering is really about relationships and sustained relationships over time, and a process more than just a discrete event. And we've been the most successful when we support climate champions and leaders in sustained processes over time to share knowledge. And this has been a really a powerful lesson for us. And often the messenger is also almost more important than the message. And that if you have a trusted messenger, you are very likely to get more traction. The third is just that we need to be creative. I think Pablo Suarez last week in opening the Resilience Hub was just really amazing in sharing some incredible arts and culture and heritage work being done around the world to really communicate climate in an innovative and creative way and capture people's imaginations. And where our knowledge initiatives have been the most successful is when we've used lots of communication modes to reach diverse audiences, like mobile apps and community resource centers and animation and theater and radio, and the list goes on. And great. I think that the creativity aspect is really something that we need to think about. And lastly, really it's important to be bringing the local knowledge to the global arena and amplifying it and ensuring that it's influencing global conversations. And this is, I think the Resilience Hub has really done wonderful things in helping to achieve that.
Thank you, Lisa.
And with that, I'm going to hand over to Aditya.
That was really great. Thank you very much. Sorry for interrupting you midway, but we have a very small amount of time here. And I request you to please stay on and also join the panel discussion, because I'm going to hold my bonus question to you for the panel discussion. With that, I'll turn to Jesse, who is the head of the ARA Secretariat. Jesse, are you online and can you hear me?
I can hear you, Aditya. Here I am.
A very warm welcome to you to the panel. Tell us a little bit about what happened yesterday with the ARA launch, and then the floor is yours for 4 minutes.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Aditya. It's a pleasure to be here, and it's a pleasure to see these 3 initiatives here together. I will speak a little about yesterday, but also I won't go into the detail too much of what the ARA does, as that will be covered a bit later. But it's more really about speaking to the point about what the ARA aims to do within the researcher practitioner community linkages, which I think what came out yesterday, and the commitments and announcements, and also just the level of participation and attendance that we saw is a testament to that. But first, I'd just like to follow up with a couple of remarks that have come up previously. The first is just one piece of good news. Shanaz kindly opened with mentioning that we had 90 plus members, over 95 in fact, just yesterday. We got our 100th member with the International Union for the Conservation of Nature, IUCN. So just to say we're pleased, to keep growing. Even on the day of the launch, we had 5 or 6 new members join, so that's wonderful. And also what Suruchi said about really these systems and the interdependence between these systems. I think we definitely need systemic solutions. And what is great about these 3 initiatives here today coming together is that we're actually trying to demonstrate, or in fact not trying to, we are demonstrating one of the keys to responding effectively to climate change today, both on the mitigation and the adaptation front. And that is that we're collaborating instead of competing. And I'd really like to invite all actors to start collaborating a bit better instead of competing. And this is something that we can see here today by what everyone has said, and also the previous work that you've highlighted, Aditya, and also, of course, the work that we'll see moving forward. So with that said, I just wanted to kind of move on to what you had asked, Aditya, which is that yesterday, the Adaptation Research Alliance was formally launched. At the time, it was about 95 organizations. Now it's a global coalition of 100 organizations across 35 economies. And the Alliance itself brings together traditional research funders, such as science councils or national research foundations, and action funders, such as development donors, philanthropic organizations in the private sector. And together with our members, we envision a future where the research community is a highly valued partner as we co-produce research with and for policymakers and practitioners, and most importantly, the vulnerable communities who are on the front line of climate change. And yesterday at the official launch, I was really inspired, as I'd mentioned, just by the turnout, the number of people who actually attended, but really the announcements and the support that we received during the formal session, but also afterwards of people coming forth and just saying that this is quite a timely initiative. And that was actually one of the highlights that they have witnessed. So we're really, really inspired and encouraged about that. So if I were to speak a bit to that, I would say, why do we actually need the IRA, the ARA today? And I would say, well, actually needed it yesterday or even a decade ago, like all climate action. This year, of course, is being called the make or break year or decade, and COP26 right now is a critical moment and a critical opportunity. But it's not only for the race to zero, it's also the race to resilience, and it's a race to prepare for transformational adaptation actions. And to do this, we need to accelerate and scale investments that address knowledge gaps and knowledge needs, and most importantly, that these are driven by local priorities. And then these knowledge gaps, of course, being co-produced towards solutions, can actually come up with effective adaptation actions. So, as I mentioned, this needs to be, or could have happened, previously, not just needed today, but needed in the past, is while research is central to better understanding what works and what doesn't work for adaptation actions, we simply don't have the time to continue with conventional research approaches. And this is when the ARA comes in to really strongly appeal for greater and better action-oriented research approaches. And also, importantly, is really learning while doing. And this requires transdisciplinary, iterative processes to co-produce knowledge and adaptation solutions that is usable in practice, it's outcome-focused, and of course, it's demand-driven. So that means that researchers and research programs must do this with stakeholders and with the end users. And that end user could be really whoever is the true end user of research. In fact, yesterday, there was also a presentation from the ARA in the WHO Health Pavilion. And there we spoke about the consultative process on global health. And the end user there is not the most vulnerable community, but we're focusing rather on climate resilient health systems. So the end user there is much more at a policy level or even a manager level of national health systems and health installations at other levels as well. So again, the end user really determines on the type of research that is needed, and of course, those knowledge gaps and needs.
Great.
So these, I was just going to add one last thing, is just really to kind of highlight that I think importantly here is that the ARA really brings together these actors from across the adaptation spectrum, but also across these levels. So from the international and national actors down to municipal authorities and grassroots organizations, so that these linkages really, it's eventually that these linkages will lead to strengthened networks and collaborations, which is at the core of the Adaptation Research Alliance. And again, this appeal for greater cooperation and collaboration instead of competition.
Right. Jesse, thank you very much for those remarks. Really clear, pithy explanation of what the ARA is trying to do. We're going to hear more on that from Dr. Rosalind West, one of the co-chairs of the Alliance, after the panel discussion that we will transition to now. I'll request the panelists to please take their positions. Sohanur, you're a youth activist. Please do join us on the stage. And Anne Hamill from IISD, please do take your place. Robbie, to take your place. And Sonur, will you ask Salim Bhai to join us as well? Great. Sonur, I know you have to leave as you have another event with the minister, but we're going to begin with you. You're a youth activist working on climate change in Bangladesh. Give us a very quick history of how you got engaged in this work and what your link with the Climate and Development Knowledge Network is.
Yes, thank you. So I am from a coastal district. It's called Jhalokati of the Borishal division. And I was faced a super cyclone. It's called Cedar. So it was a nightmare to me when I was a student of the grade 7. So it's not new to us. After the super cyclone Cedar, we faced super cyclone Aila, Mohsen, Nargis, Ruano, Amphan, Bulbul, Reshmi. So it's continuing and intensified. So it's a new normal to us. So our people, they are taking adaptation measures, and they don't know about what is adaptation or mitigation, but they are autonomously taking adaptation, like floating a vegetable garden in my area is a cultural things to our pupils. They are making floating vegetable garden. So in terms of the resilient, so our people is more resilient. So they are cope with the more disaster. So our position is that we are not responsible for this crisis. So we are emitting very minimal is 0.04, but we are facing this crisis, and our children, our women, our community people, and climate crisis is not impacting to rich and poor is equally. So our people, community people, they are taking the, like child marriage is a coping mechanism, or child labor is coping mechanism. So due to this crisis, our children is losing their childhood, and we are losing our life standard. And many people from our communities, they are migrating to secondary city like Dhaka or Chittagong, and it's now is internal, then it will be external. So we ask climate justice and climate crisis everywhere, and global communities, they are telling that we are in the same crisis, same boat, but we are not same crisis. They are in a ship and we are in a small boat. So we ask for climate justice, and we started mobilization and mobilizing grassroots communities, young people, and we joined the Fridays for Future movement, because the global communities, they are providing empty promise to us with many blah, blah, blah. So we ask justice and fairness and accountability from them. Thank you.
So tell us a little bit, Sonur, about your engagement with the Climate and Development Knowledge Network. You've done this really interesting piece of work in Maulvi Bazaar, helping translate the government's guidelines so that local communities can really understand them and assimilate them to deal with COVID-19. Tell us a little bit about your interaction.
Yes, thank you. So I found the announcement from the ICAT, it's a voice from frontline. So I am feeling interested with this. The ICAT, CDKN and ZRP, they are interested to focus on the frontliners. So then I communicated with the ICAT, and then I found it's a more focus on the COVID response. But then I covered 2 stories from the Satkhira, is a most cyclone prone, and many communities is now underwater since last 1 year, like Pratapnagar, like Ashashuni, and many areas is still underwater. So then I covered some youth action. So they are not, they are feeling abandoned by the global community, but they are doing something with their own capacity, own knowledge, and they are building own leadership on this ground. And you mentioned the Maulvi Bazaar. It's an interesting story from Khasiya community in Maulvi Bazaar. So Khasiya community, they are applying their indigenous knowledge, their tradition by self-restriction and obeying their health practices. So the connection with the climate is that, so indigenous people is the protector of our environment, our forest. So, and they are very organized with their Punjis leader, and they have some minister like this. So they tackled the COVID pandemic with their own strengths. So they also can tackle the climate crisis also with their own indigenous knowledge and practice. But they are facing many problems on their own ground. So we need more support to them for this adaptation and resilience building. And we are on the way to risk to resilience. Bangladesh is the role model risk to resilience. Thank you.
Right. Yes, guys, don't hold back. So one more question to you. I know young people across the world struggle to be heard and be taken seriously by decision makers and policy makers. In your experience, what does it take for young people to be taken seriously, and what role can networks like the Climate and Development Knowledge Network, the Resilience Knowledge Coalition, and the Adaptation Research Alliance play in supporting you in that campaign?
Yes, thank you. So we are fighting for our future and also present. And our future is not negotiable. And the negotiator is negotiating without our participation, and nothing about us without us, we feels. And we think we are talking that the government is not doing enough, and anything is not doing enough for tackling this crisis. And we young people, we are striking, we are taking selfie with placards, so it's also not enough. So we are taking adapting measures, and with the Catalyst grant of the CDKN and ICAT, it is called Government Small Grants. So we are working with the frontliners about the knowledge of adaptation, and we are translating many stories in their own languages. And now they are, feel resilient and with their knowledge leadership. So now they are in the front line to take major adaptation measures. But now support needed to continue this effort to need a real action for them also. And I think the community-based organization is a very crucial to tackle this crisis, to build community resilience, and with their knowledge, and their knowledge should be more covered or more documented, because we are following the IPCC report and scientists. We are behind the scientists, but we have also focused on the indigenous knowledge too. Thank you.
Thank you, Sonu. That's great. I think we have Rosemary online. Rosemary, if you can hear us, do come off mute and join us here in the room. Thank you for your patience. And again, I know how busy you are during COP26, so thank you for joining us. Do we have Rosemary? These are the challenges of running a hybrid event. Oh, hi, Rosemary.
Yes, I'm here.
We can't hear you.
Hi, everybody. Can you hear me?
Perfect. We can hear you now perfectly. Rosemary, Sohanur was in the room, and he's been talking about the work he's done with Catalytic Grants. And we know that you too have accessed Catalytic Grants. Tell us a little bit about what this was, how you came across it, what the outcome was, briefly. Thank you. Over to you.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm happy to be here. I'm happy to meet my other colleagues who are working with the frontline communities to create resilience amongst our community members. So I work with Women Climate Centers International, and we are recipients of the Catalytic Grant. We attended one of the webinars that was being hosted by the Resilience Hub, and we had a colleague of ours who had attended these sessions. So she had gotten a chance to be requested by ICAD to do voices from the front line. So she actually came and shared with us what was happening and how we needed to really bring out the work that we are doing and share with the world what we are doing. So during this webinar that was happening, we managed to be there, a number of us. So we listened to the webinar, and after listening to the webinar and comparing with what our colleague had shared with us, we realized that it was important for us to share our story. So ICAD reached out to us to share our stories. So we quickly put up our stories because we have them, because we work with the community people and they're doing a brilliant job. So we shared our stories from Kenya and from Uganda, and our stories were actually covered and were aired out. So our stories were actually bringing out the COVID response, because at that time it was voices from the front line in terms of responding to COVID and how to manage COVID. So we had two great community initiatives that were being done by the local women. One that was repositioning their skills on food security. They realized that many people were flowing in because of the COVID pandemic from the city, and the food basket was being overstretched, and people really needed to get some food to be able to survive. So we have these ladies in the community who work together, so they thought that they could really use their skills to improve food security at the household level, which they actually did. And as we speak, communities have kitchen gardens and communities are food secure in terms of vegetables and spices to improve COVID immunity. Then we had a team of women again who also wanted to respond to COVID, and we called them the COVID women, who worked so hard, and they were able to try and remobilize their own little resources as groups, and were able to learn how to make soap, because we believe in sharing knowledge through doing, practical hands-on skills. So they made their soap and actually focused on the very vulnerable people of the community, the old, the disabled, and the child-headed homes. And they actually did a splendid job by distributing a lot of soap, as they made hand washing stations for the communities, and they taught them how to wash their hands and respond to COVID. So that is how we came across ICAD. and we wrote these stories. Later on, we attended a certain webinar. I just can't recall the name well. And in that webinar, we talked, and after talking, there was the call for Catalytic Grant. So because we believe in trying, and we believe that what we are doing is actually the right thing, we gave it a try, and we got it under Group 10, where WCCI is part of the team, and some other 2 groups in Kenya. And we have already started working on that Catalytic Grant, where we are actually trying to improve on our women climate centers, or rather village learning hubs, where we are trying to create centers where we can demystify the big language from our big governments and our big donors, so that the women are able to understand what we really mean when we say that climate is bad and we have to be resilient. So these hubs are being created within the community, where we are disseminating knowledge in the local language in a simplified manner, so that our women are able to understand, they are able to learn what we really want them to learn.
Thank you, Rosemary. I'm going to come back to you in a minute, but I just want to turn to Dr. Salimul Haq, Director of ICAD. So in your time, you've catalyzed and been part of probably 24 networks. Do tell us, what value in your view do these networks play? And specifically, since you've played such an important role in all 3 of the initiatives you're talking about here, the ARA, the Resilience Knowledge Coalition, and the Climate Development Knowledge Network, specifically, what value can these 3 initiatives add?
Thank you very much, Aditya. So you're right, I've been doing this for a long time. And I do it because I first believe in it, and I also do it because I think it's effective. Very often in the research community, we tend to think big data and quantitative information will turn the tide in terms of decision makers. We don't have a good history of doing that. On the other hand, quite often stories of human beings will reach people's hearts rather than their minds. And we're seeing that happen here all over the place. And so I'm a great believer in storytelling as a form of knowledge exchange, not just storytelling for its own sake, but as a means of communicating these kinds of things, disasters, impacts of climate change. You can have all kinds of data and maps showing what's happening, and then you have a person who comes from the place and tells you the story of how they suffered and what they did. And even more important than using their stories as victims, what we try to do is to demonstrate that they are not just victims. They are actually the first adapters, I call them now, because climate change is happening and they are dealing with it. And if they don't die, they have by definition adapted. And if they have adapted, then they know how to adapt. And I would say most of us in this room don't. They do. And we should be learning from them. So my one pitch in all of these 3 research networks that I've been involved in is value the knowledge of the people, the experiential knowledge of the people. Respect it and use it and bring it into our domain of the peer-reviewed scientific literature. All right, this is a arena that the world academia has created for a gold standard on research. It's irrelevant. I don't know a single decision maker who reads scientific papers. All right, scientific papers are read by those who write. Every paper has 2 readers, one who wrote it and then their wife or somebody else, and that's it. Okay, but that's what they get promoted on. So the incentive structures are not there for doing this kind of innovative research, and I'm hoping that all 3 networks that I'm associated with will step out of the box that they have, research by and large has been confined to.
So on that note, of the 3 initiatives, the Adaptation Research Alliance is the youngest. It was launched yesterday. It has 100 members. The chair of the alliance, Dr. Rosalind West, is here, and we'll hear from her in a minute. In the next 6 months, what would you like to see from a new network such as this? What will it take to demonstrate to you that it is delivering tangible benefit?
So I'll share with you something that I'm doing, which is actually a means of monitoring all three networks, including the ARA. It's called Gobeshona. The word means research in Bangla. I'd like you all to remember it. It's also the name of a network of grassroots local adapters. And we have a major conference every year. We held one this year in January. We'll hold the next one next year in February, and from now on, every year. And we are situating ourselves to be the monitors of these research initiatives. Do they add any value to us, to the people on the grounds? To me, that is the number one criteria, not how many peer-reviewed papers they publish. And we're also applying that to the big initiatives that are taking place and signing ups that are taking place on the locally led adaptation principles by big organizations. I saw USA just joined and signed up. Signing up is the easy bit. Delivering is the more difficult bit. And the question is, who are you delivering for? And I will be looking out for making sure that you deliver to the actual adapters on the ground. Thank you.
Thank you, Salim Bhai. I'll come back to you. Yes, do give him a hand. Come on, don't let me stop you. Sonur, I think you have to join a meeting, so we'll let you go. And thank you very much for your contribution. And we'll continue the panel discussion. And I'll turn to now Dr. Anne Hamill, who's with the IISD. You've recently joined the Adaptation Research Alliance. Why?
First of all, thank you for giving me a PhD. So my family will be thrilled with that. Look, we joined the Adaptation Research Alliance for three main reasons: partnerships, learning, and amplification. IISD is a policy research organization. We occupy a particular space in the sort of knowledge to...
Dear called delegates, we kindly remind you to wear your face mask over your mouth and nose at all times during your time at the conference, unless you are seated in a room with appropriate distance. While eating or drinking, we are medically exempt. Thank you for your cooperation.
That's okay. Important message. And so as a policy research organization, we work with and primarily target our work for decision makers, typically at the national level. And obviously this is just one slice of the knowledge to action value chain that's going to actually deliver results on the ground when it comes to adaptation. And so we absolutely rely on partnerships to actually understand what the needs are, to help us monitor what's happening on the ground, whether the investments are going to the right places, delivering the right kinds of benefits. And so I think, we joined to be able to sort of help us structure these conversations. And I also think that in working with decision makers too, oftentimes our work isn't structured as a traditional research project. Frankly, we don't have time for that. But there are so many research opportunities that we see, these missed opportunities we see in our work, where we're working with these decision makers, where we're engaging with them regularly, really understanding their incentives, their motivations, what's driving them to make the kinds of decisions that they're making. And there's these missed opportunities to be able to sort of turn those into insights that would feed back into the research community, that might find their way back into the peer-reviewed literature, that might also feed into conversations more at the grassroots. And it's really hard to make these links. And so our hope is that something like the ARA will allow us to link up with research actors at different levels, and then we could be that broker to some of the national conversations and decisions that are taking place.
And now we're going to play a game called Tweet Length Answers. We're going to play Tweet Length Answers. So, 3 asks of the ARA.
Resource mobilization support, space for innovative partnerships, and space for innovative storytelling and communication. I think it's still very fragmented, and there's a lot that we're not sort of joining up.
And 3 things that you are willing to bring to the table as an ARA member.
Links to the national policy conversations in many of these contexts. I think our own sort of efforts in resource mobilization, we have our own connections and links and conversations that we can also bring to the table. And just a lot of humility and flexibility and openness to experimentation.
Right. So, and on the issue of national policy making, we know that you've been playing a pivotal role in the NAP Global Network, which has demonstrated impact, is highly influential. How do you think the ARA and CDKN as well as RKC can support initiatives such as the NAP Global Network that is aiming to enhance capacity for national level policy making?
So I'll be very concrete. There's two things in all the conversations I've been having with our national government partners. Two issues and priorities come up over and over and over again in our conversations. One is they really, really want to get serious on monitoring, evaluation, and learning on adaptation. And they know that this isn't just sort of tracking what policies are being passed, what projects are being funded, but really what's happening on the ground. And I think we're all struggling with this as an adaptation community, and I think there's a lot that can be done to really sort of push this agenda ahead at a research level, but also certainly link that to the policy discussions. And there's a real urgency around this now. The second one is that national policymakers, the ones that we're speaking with, they say, great, we've got a NAP, or we're about to develop a NAP. We need to make sure that this is linked to the local realities, the local decision makers. This should ideally be done as they're formulating their NAP, but oftentimes in the first round, it's not really done that well. And so now they're like, we need to get to implementation, and this is not going to happen with links to the local level. And so there are a lot of gaps and needs in making those vertical integration links. And I think there's a lot to be learned from a community like the ARA and the other research alliances.
A really tangible example there. Thank you so much, Anne. We're going to come back to you. I'm going to turn now to Robbie. Robbie, you lead the Climate and Development Knowledge Network's work in Ethiopia. Can you give us a real visceral, tangible example of how CDKN plays the role of a knowledge broker to enhance resilience in a national context?
Okay, thank you. Thank you for having me, Aditya. I can talk of an example or work we're doing now, or where over a period of 2 years, we were doing knowledge brokering in the climate change gender space. So at the time we started this work, the gender was starting to get included, was part of the strategy. And the National Adaptation Plan for Ethiopia had a strong gender component and so on. But the thing was, there wasn't as much in translating that to action, strategy to action. So the ask from government then was for us, as knowledge brokers, to compile case study, country examples, and things like that, where, to see how this has been translated in other countries. As we progressed on doing this and compiling this, case examples and so on and so forth, our partners in government said, "Oh, we've been doing this. We have examples of this as well." It was only that we didn't take them into account, and so I guess one thing to say here is, possibly we've made that, or together with government partners, a bit more accessible through the stories, the case studies we brought. But also it encouraged others and people within government to bring on their own learnings, their own case studies, and become knowledge brokers themselves. The output was a range of knowledge products and interesting games and things like that, tools, instruments on how you can mainstream gender. But I think the big, quote-unquote, success was in bringing others along through that process. And as a global knowledge brokering network, that's the best you can do, I guess.
Thank you, Robbie. I'm going to come back to you. Salim, I want to go back to you. I would be remiss if I don't ask you this question that everyone probably wants to ask you. As someone who's been tracking the negotiations closely and whatever's happening at COP most comprehensively, tell us about 3 hits and 3 misses that you've seen in this COP, and any implications for our initiatives that we're talking about here.
Well, you know that we've just received a draft text from the presidency and I'll be going in a little while to do a press conference on that, but I'll give you a preview. The three misses are we're nowhere near the 1.5 degree. We're doing better than the 2.7 we started off with. We're moving in the right direction. If you believe the announcements that have been made on methane and forestry, and there is reason to doubt these kinds of announcements. They've been done in the past and not delivered. But nevertheless, it's moving in the right direction, but not fast enough. The second one is on climate finance. We've all heard about the 100 billion that never came. We hear now a promise of doubling the adaptation finance, which still doesn't get to 50%. It's currently 20%. If it's doubled, it'll be 40%. And we wanted 50%. So that's another failure. And the third one, from my perspective, is something that I feel COP26 is new for COP26 and COP26 has to respond to, is the reality of loss and damage from climate change. It's happening now. We postponed COP26 by a year. We should have been here a year ago. And in this year, we postponed it for valid reasons, for COVID-19 and travel restrictions and the pandemic. But the climate didn't take a year off. The climate actually came and hit us in that intervening period. And the Working Group 1 report of the IPCC came out on 9th of August, demonstrated it. So we are now already in the era of loss and damage from human-induced climate change. And if the COP cannot rise to that occasion, then the COP makes itself redundant. We still have a few hours left. They can do better. I hope they do better, but we shall see.
Implications for us?
Implications for us actually are nothing to do with a decision in the COP. The lifetimes of most of us are locked in. Climate will hit us. We are not preventing it. Nothing we do here is preventing it. We can prevent it for our children, the younger people, in their lifetimes, okay? We are talking about their lifetimes now, not our lifetimes. Our lifetimes are locked in. Right. We will face climate change. It'll be worse every day, every year from now on in our lifetimes. Right. Get used to that.
Yeah, I think your words are well heard by us. I want to turn now to Jesse, who's online. Jesse, if you could come off mute and come online, please. I think you've just heard Salim Bhai talking about how we are locked in. We have to prepare to face impacts, prepare to face loss and damage. If you permit me a cheeky question, in your input, we heard a lot of big words. We heard transformation, we heard knowledge to action, we heard transdisciplinarity, we heard co-creation. Think of a woman farmer in a flood-affected area of Bangladesh. In 5 years from now, what benefit do you think the Adaptation Research Alliance is going to bring to that person?
Great, thank you, Aditya. Great question, and of course, very powerful comments by Salim. Thank you, Salim. I think that's a great question, and that is one of the biggest challenges. And also, as Salim mentioned, potentially in Gobeshona, maybe there's a reporting requirement for initiatives going to share, the impact itself. So what would I see in 5 years? 5 years, which of course is a relatively short time, particularly in climate scales, is still a very important time. So what I would expect to see by then is that the Adaptation Research Alliance and various partner initiatives, as well as the ARI members, have actually started well along this paradigm shift. So these knowledge gaps and knowledge needs are actually helping the people on the ground. So this Wimmer farmer that you had mentioned, that actually when she has a burning issue, when she has something that arises that she doesn't understand how best to respond, she's able actually to appeal to others, whether it's in her communities, whether it's in her own knowledge systems, or beyond her own immediate networks, of actually finding the right people who can collaborate and to help support her understand her current situation, but also the future situation that brings together both scientific or academic knowledge as well as the local knowledge that is available at the time. And then together working with everybody along this spectrum to actually help her understand what is the best adaptation options that she has available to her at that time.
Great, Jesse. Thank you so much for painting such a clear word picture. I'm going to play a quick word association game. We'll start with Anne, since you're always a sport, Anne. When I say the phrase knowledge to action, just tell me the first two words that come to your mind. Knowledge to action.
Impact and innovation.
Nice. Robbie, knowledge to action.
Translating research to action, seeing something happening on the ground.
Salim bhai?
Actual impacts on the ground, not just action.
Jesse?
I would say relationships and trust.
Fantastic. Lisa?
I would say empowerment.
Rosemary? Shuchi? Go ahead, Rosemary. The first word that comes to mind when we say knowledge to action. You're on mute, Rosemary.
I'm saying decision making.
Great, thank you. And Shuchi?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Great. I'd say systemic solutions.
Nice, great. Great, I'll just turn to the audience. I'm sure you have burning questions to ask our panelists on all the remarkable things you've heard in this session. Any questions? Sunana, you have a question?
Thank you, Aditya. Thank you. I suppose this could be to anybody on the panel and those on the call. I was just thinking about what our young panelists talked about today, and him being very much a community representative. And we talked about translating knowledge from across the globe and across verticals. I'm just wondering, for somebody in the community who maybe they organize themselves and take adaptation actions based on their own experience and knowledge, how do they get to access this international knowledge that we are all in the international community putting together, but may not actually be all that accessible on the ground? So I'm just wondering if you'll have any thoughts about that. How do we take all of this knowledge and then channel it to people who want to use it on the ground but may not have the necessary tools for it?
Sohanar was a good example of a Bangladeshi young man who made it all the way to Glasgow, all right? With his initiative. And, you know, when we were sitting here before the panel started, he told me the story of how hard it was for him to get here, all right? I can tell you it was a very hard story, and I've heard many of these stories from many of my friends and colleagues who made it to Glasgow in the end. Many didn't. But I'll give you another example of the desire for knowledge and the willingness to learn from my country, Bangladesh, all right? In Glasgow right now, we had the summit meeting with all the leaders come in, did speeches, the world media covered that for a day and a half, and then the leaders left and the media left, and we have been struggling with the negotiations for 2 whole weeks. Day after tomorrow, when we finish, hopefully we finish on time, the media will come back and report on what came out, all right? Very few have been following the negotiations through the details, with an exception. The exception is there are 3 private television channels in Bangladesh who sent with their own money reporters to Glasgow, and they've been doing this for several years now, and they're reporting from Glasgow every single day, live dispatches to a general audience in Bangladesh, women, men, farmers, fishers, who know what's happening in Glasgow. They not only know what's happening in Glasgow, They know what happened yesterday. What did Kerry say? Today, what did Obama say? They are following on a day-by-day basis the negotiations. This is ordinary people in Bangladesh. They are the most aware people about the issue of climate change anywhere in the world, all right? Ordinary people. That's who we need to be working with, and in ensuring that that is our clientele for providing the information. And don't talk to them, don't talk down to them. That's what the global media is doing. It's a summit. Xi didn't come. The summit was a failure. Xi coming, not coming, it makes no difference whatsoever. The Chinese have been here from day zero. They are negotiating every day. China is part of this negotiation. There was never any question of China not being part of the negotiation. But the media made it into Xi didn't come, and therefore it was a failure. That's talking down to the audience. That is not explaining to the audience what is happening here. That is giving them a completely wrong picture of what this is all about. And so we, the researchers, the media, we all have a role to play here. We've not been doing very well.
Thank you. Any other quick responses, or should we take another question from the audience? Robbie, please go ahead.
Yes. I remember in the work we did in Ethiopia, one of the things we discussed was bringing a case example from the southwest of the country that does not speak the national language. So we were considering translating it to the national language and then to English. But then when we start discussing, well, we weren't going to translate it back, the output to, the local language it came from. We never took up that case, followed through, but, considering that, not considering communities as taking information from them, but giving back information is also important, when you do the final product.
Right.
Yeah.
Thank you. Any other questions from the audience before we go to Dr. Rosalind West, who's going to tell you in a bit more detail about the Adaptation Research Alliance, and we're going to show you a very short film about the Alliance as well. Any burning questions? Yes, please go ahead.
Thank you. Is this on? It's okay? Okay. I was wondering if you had any advice for academics and researchers who are stuck in that academic system that you were talking about. We want to help, we want to be applied, but it's very, very difficult. So I don't know if the panel have any tips for those who want to take their research and apply it and work with partners, and how we can do that within this very archaic system that we work in. Thank you.
I'll take a first crack at that. Because I'm an academic, I work in a university, and we run a network of universities both in Bangladesh, it's called Gobeshona, and another network of universities in least developed countries called LUC, Least Developed Country University Consortium on Climate Change. And that's what we do, is we get our faculty members and our research students, postgrad students, to go out and spend time in the field with the communities. Learn from the communities. Don't teach the communities. You don't get the right to teach them until you learn from them. Right? So you have to go with humility. And then over time, you start co-creating knowledge. Adaptation is all about co-creating knowledge. And if you want to be a good adaptation researcher, then spend time with people who are doing, and then learn from the doers. And then, as we know, adaptation is a learning by doing science, where learners and doers have to work together. You're the learner, the researcher. The doers are the doers, a farmer, a fisher, a decision maker. And together, learn together, capture the knowledge and the experience that comes out of it.
Great. Thank you, Salim. And, sorry, you may not have a PhD, but you've done a lot of robust research that all of us have cited multiple times. How does one become more applied?
I mean, it's basically riffing off of what Salim just said. I think it's looking for those innovative partnerships. We're open to working with academics and research universities and institutes all the time. It's a matter of aligning timelines and incentives, right? And so we've been in situations where somebody said, well, I've got a 3-year research project that I'd really like to link up with IISD for on this. And we said, we don't have 3 years. first of all, our funding only goes for 18 months, and the government decision makers that we're working with want answers within 12 months, right? So I think it's trying to figure out sort of that sweet spot of collaboration, but I think there's a lot of space for that as well. So I think, flexibility and openness, and then just taking the first step of reaching out and having the conversation, I would say.
Great, thank you, Anne. Robbie, do you have anything to add?
One thing I've noticed with research and something that in our work with government comes up is, that there's also a lot of interest from government to be part of research processes, to sort of early enough identify their needs, so the wet supply is also responsive to their needs.
Right.
Yeah.
Great. Please do give a loud round of applause to a fantastic panel, physically and online. And I'm going to now invite Dr. Rosalind West onto the stage, who's going to talk about the Adaptation Research Alliance, and then we'll have two excellent speakers succeeding her.
Thank you so much, Aditya, and it would be great if you could put some slides up for me. Thank you. At first, I'd just really like to say thank you so much to everyone else who's spoken during this session. Thank you for your wisdom and your advice, for sharing your knowledge, your expertise, and your ideas. And I think it's really clear that, there's so much to be gained by this collaboration across these three initiatives and far beyond. I'd really like to take this opportunity today to really celebrate that formal launch of the Adaptation Research Alliance that we had yesterday. I had this idea 2 years ago at COP25, and then shared it with Anand Patwardhan, professor at the University of Maryland, and together, we're both utterly humbled and delighted that we've really now brought this into, really a huge and global coalition representing 100 organizations from 30 economies, over half of which are from the global south. So, the ARA was formed in response to the scale and the urgency of the challenge faced by the world's most vulnerable communities to climate change. We know that action and finance for adaptation are crucial, but there's a lack of evidence of what works and what doesn't, to really effectively reduce vulnerability. Also, there's this disjoint between the research that we're doing at the moment and what people actually need to know to do that practically, to practically reduce that vulnerability. And there's also barriers to bringing that knowledge into use. And I know that GRP and CDKN have been doing enormous, very effective work to reduce those barriers. But also bringing about this systemic and transformative change that we need to see in the research system, and particularly the links between research and action, is precisely the mission of the ARA, and what I hope that it can really add to the work of CDKN and to GRP. So if we look on the next slide, I think we've got the mission statement of the Alliance. So this is really to accelerate and scale investments in action-oriented research in developing countries that addresses those pressing knowledge needs for adaptation and resilience of the most vulnerable, that builds capacity at all stages from research right through to action, and that strengthens those research implementation linkages and promotes greater learning. If we have a look on the next slide, you can see here, this enormous range of organizations. I think if we go any further, we're going to, they're not going to fit on one slide. So, of course we want to do that, but it really is incredible to see this whole array of logos here. And it spans that full range of actors from research to action. It's multi-stakeholder, and importantly, it's multi-layer. It's operating all different levels. It include from universities, research institutes, particularly from the global south, such as the least developed countries universities consortium on climate change, universities from the global north. I think you can see the University of Washington there, the University of Exeter. We've got community-based and action organizations like the Mahila Sewer Trust, which was featured on the Adaptation Day on Monday afternoon. We've got national and regional government departments and agencies such as the AFD in France and FAPESP in Brazil. And our intentions as this really amazing new community coming together like this, we were very proud to release a joint statement that's on the next slide together yesterday. I know, just to pick out a few, see, you'll have to have a look on the website to actually see the joint statement, because it doesn't seem to have appeared there. But fortunately, we've picked out some of the key statements from it on the right-hand side. So, one of those particular ones is that these members of the Alliance have really declared that this is a bold new coalition of global adaptation actors, and their intention to catalyse and scale investments in action-oriented research and innovation that really strengthens resilience. They also committed to endorse a set of principles on the next slide and putting them into use. These principles were co-developed by all members of the Alliance, as a framework for effective co-production of research that is locally relevant, that is solution-oriented, and that is needs-driven. And we really hope, as an Alliance, that these principles can drive a transformative change and in the way that we approach doing research and taking action. Encapsulated within these principles, is a real aim by all stakeholders to collaborate on all steps of that process from research through to action, including the research design, the outcome generation, all the way up to funding goals and decision making, allowing the solutions to be produced in an iterative way where we learn along the way of doing that. So 100 members have signed this joint statement and endorsed these principles, and some of our members have actually already integrated them. So CABI have already adopted these principles and embedded them in their research strategy. Now, for realising this vision further, we've been working across the Alliance to co-create an overall strategy to take forward our theory of change. And we settled on 3 key functions for the ARA. That is to be an advocate for the change, to be a facilitator for the change through better research planning, better coordination of our efforts, and radical collaboration across this group of organisations to deliver that. And then also to be a catalyst for the change by helping to mobilise and deliver resources, exactly as was called for earlier, for action-oriented research. So our first, actually on the next slide, our first adaptation research for impact principle is to ensure that research is user-centred, that it's needs-driven, and that it's solution-oriented. And we've already made a start of bringing this principle into use by developing a work stream on consultative processes to identify the real priorities from the user, from the people perspective for research. For those to identify both the needs and the opportunities. We want to make sure that that's both, that includes in health, that includes in foods, that includes on gender, and also on climate risk. So we've made a start on those 4 areas, and we hope to do many more in the future. And then another important step that I'm pleased to kind of announce today, really, is that we'll be launching a new call of micro grants for doing more of this, for really identifying what are the burning issues and what does the Alliance need to do next to take those forwards, and really ground sourcing that. Then the next stage, really, we recognise that the adaptation landscape is one with many actors and networks. And, of course, we're hearing that today in this very event. And we believe that to be most effective, the Alliance really needs to facilitate the connections between all of those different members and the different networks, exactly like GRP, like CDKN, like Future Earth, etc. And so to that end, we're really entering into some strategic partnerships with some of the key actors. And we've already made a start with the risk-informed early action partnership. So we're really glad to have that strategic relationship there. And also with the UN Development Programme. So this, I guess working with some of those organisations that are really working internationally, that really complements the bottom-up process and helps to surface the needs and opportunities at all levels, from the local level all the way up to the global level. And finally, learning remains a very key objective for stronger research action linkages, and advancing that learning through sharing what we're all doing, through all of the many activities that we're all involved in, what we're learning along the way, what's working, what's not, so that we can all gain from that and make progress much more quickly. So that's really central to the ARA's aims. But as an alliance, we want to go beyond just identifying priorities and organising what we're doing. We also really want to bring actionable knowledge into use. And that's where our partnership with the Global Resilience Partnership and with the CDKN are really important. But also, we actually want to see some of these action-oriented research programs come into use. And I was really pleased that yesterday, Minister Milling, in the ARA's formal launch, was able to announce that in tandem with our Canadian partners who you're going to hear from shortly, the UK has been developing the Climate Adaptation and Resilience Research Programme, CLARE. So we've collectively, between the UK and Canada, committed £110 million to support action-oriented research and capacity strengthening to build resilience, to address knowledge gaps, and to inform development to enable much more effective response to climate crisis in the global south. We also, at the launch, saw the launch, really importantly, of 2 new innovation funds dedicated to adaptation and resilience from 2 of the other ARA members, the GSM Association and the Global Innovation Fund. And those innovation funds, I think, are really important for accelerating, testing, and adopting different innovations that have the potential to scale. And, that's absolutely crucial for adaptation and resilience. So, we're right at the beginning of the journey here for this alliance. We've got 100 members from across the community. They're really have committed to helping us drive this paradigm shift in this link between research and action. We hope to keep up that momentum and to grow much further. So, do please get in touch if you're interested in being involved. That's exactly how this is going to work. I guess just to end by saying that the journey so far has been one really of partnership and collaboration, and we really hope that will remain the hallmark of our way ahead. I think that the strength of an alliance is truly in its members and their willingness to collaborate, to share, and to work together. And I'm really pleased that now you'll be able to hear from several of those members in a video. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Rosalind. Let's see a short video before we invite
IISD joined the ARA to extend our reach and impact on adaptation. We really felt that the ARA would introduce us to new types of research actors and help us co-create and implement exciting and innovative research that would have lasting effects for adaptation and resilience building around the world.
ActionAid Myanmar has joined the ARA because it believes that it is one of the most effective collective platforms to tackle climate change. Today is the moment for us to join hands and address some of the biggest issues that we're faced with, and I believe that ARA is a great way to start.
Green Africa Youth Organization decided to join the Adaptation Research Alliance because, for us, young people have a future that is very uncertain, and joining the ARA is important to define a resilient future where young people will live in a very resilient community to the impacts of climate change. And this is a motivation and the background to the work that we do at GAIO.
ODI is really proud and excited to be a member of the ARA. The focus of the ARA on being demand-driven, solutions-orientated, and based on equitable partnerships is a great fit for our mission and values. First, it's energizing for us to be a part of a critical mass of organizations committed to these values. And second, we're always learning and seeking to improve to find the most effective ways to manage climate risk, adapt and build resilience from the local to the global level.
We saw this as an opportunity to join a platform which has similar perspectives on knowledge production, knowledge dissemination, knowledge utilization. And therefore, the focus on climate issues, on adaptation and mitigation, in my view, can only be improved through practical action at the community level, and knowledge so produced can inform policy.
The ARA focuses on action-oriented research, which is exactly what is needed to find the solutions to the adaptation challenges that we so urgently need. The ARA can also contribute to building the evidence base for what works in adaptation to ensure that the solutions we are investing in are the right actions to benefit those who need them the most.
So SOAS joined the ARA because it mirrors some of our own ethical principles and norms around how to do research. We're particularly interested in pushing the decolonizing knowledge agenda to bring in greater perspectives from different peoples, different places around climate change impacts, how we think about it, and how we tackle adaptation as a consequence.
Great, thank you. Now to close up the session, we have two very special speakers next. I'd like to invite Dominic Sharon, Vice President of Canada's International Development Research Centre, that has played a key and catalytic role in all these initiatives, to say a few words.
Thank you very much, and it's really a great pleasure to be here, and thanks, Rosalind, for talking about our exciting new phase of collaboration with the UK in support of the Climate and Adaptation Climate and Resilience Initiative that's part of the Adaptation Research Alliance. Canada's International Development Research Centre has been supporting research in the adaptation and resilience space since around 2005, a little bit before, much of that in partnership with the UK. And I'm speaking you to today with this clock ticking. You know, we are what, nearly 2022. The clock is ticking. There are every day that we sit on knowledge that might help reduce vulnerability, improve resilience, and help the vulnerable adapt is a day that those people may be pushed more into extreme poverty or die from the impacts of climate change. So the urgency with which we need to go forward now with these fantastic connected up networks and initiative can't be lost on any of us. It is now time for business unusual, I think, as Dr. Anand Padwatan said yesterday. We can't continue just to create knowledge and share it amongst a network of other knowledge holders. It's really time for that knowledge to be put into action, and these networks are committed to that. It's very exciting, but it's also really challenging. We've also heard a number of times over the past 10 days how knowledge, there are different types of knowledge. There are different holders of knowledge. There are holders of traditional knowledge. There are holders of formal scientific knowledge. And there are barriers to accessing that knowledge. There are barriers to sharing that knowledge. So these networks have a tremendous opportunity now to accelerate that connecting of different types of knowledge, accelerating and continuing that co-creation of knowledge that will lead to resilience. The knowledge in and of itself isn't enough, as we know, and we've talked about and heard today about how important it is for the knowledge to be connected to solutions, to be connected to the people in the field who can translate that knowledge into action. The people, either the local people who are who need to be convinced, first of all, of a solution, and who need to be engaged in the creation of that solution, but also the powerful, the policymakers, the private sector, influential people in the world who have the ability to bring about larger scale change that will also contribute to that resilience. The last thing that I think we want to bear in mind as well is that there are different dimensions of vulnerability and different dimensions of resilience. Those are determined by people's identities, whether it's because they're young or they're women or men, or because they are part of a group that's in the middle of the action or on the edge of the action in society. And as we think about resilience, we can take a lesson from the pandemic in that understanding that as long as there are some people who are vulnerable to the impacts of the climate in a particular place, then we're all still exposed to that impact, and that resilience is a collective effort to move us forward. Resilience isn't going to be enough. If we think of a boxing dummy kind of exercise, you know, you hit it, goes down, comes back up. Hit it, goes down, comes back up. Great. How many of us want to be that dummy that has great resilience, keeps getting back up, but keeps getting hit? Adaptation is that process of moving from a state of continually being exposed to that hit into a place where we're no longer exposed to that hit. And we know that the climate hits are coming. We're locked in, as Dr. Salim Hook said, we're locked in. My generation, the next generation, the grandkids maybe, if we move out of this feeling of just bracing ourselves for the next hit and moving to a place where we're no longer being impacted, no longer as vulnerable, and able to make the changes to reduce that, that's adaptation. That's what we want. And we want it for the most vulnerable, certainly. So that's the challenge. And that's where these networks who are focused on bridging the formal and informal knowledge, bringing it to bear on both decision making, but also the local communities, engaging the local communities in the changes and the actions that they need. That's what we need. That's the challenge. It's enormous, but the being connected in doing it is going to lead us more quickly and more effectively to the kinds of measurable changes that we will see that will help us maybe 5 years, hopefully sooner, see that in fact we are making progress in building resilience and adapting to climate change. Thanks very much.
I'd like to now invite Nate, who heads the Global Resilience Partnership.
Thank you, Aditya. And thank you very much, everyone, for the opportunity to provide some almost closing remarks to what has been a really great session. So Aditya started out with one of the early questions was, whether we are going to play nice. And I think obviously we are, but we're also going to play urgently, we're going to play ambitiously and play seriously. And certainly we've heard that throughout the COP for the last few weeks. Because when we talk about resilience and adaptation building, it's difficult stuff. We've spent, as in GRP, about 35 million over the last 8 years on resilience building in various contexts. And it's really challenging. It can often be really context specific. And there are huge challenges with the measurement, evaluation, and learning of it as well. We need much more robustness in there. And in also ensuring that measurement and evaluation and learning meets not just the needs of donors, but also meets the needs of people on the ground. And just before I jump in, Dominic, I would take you up on that one point about resilience and bouncing back, because that's not how we define resilience. We're not trying to bounce back, as you say, to a point and be vulnerable again during the next crisis. When we talk about resilience, amongst our partners at least, it's much more about the transformative resilience. It's the novel ways of stewarding our ecosystems, the novel ways of creating livelihoods that really will allow us to thrive in the face of future shocks and stresses. So I think that's important. But I would just pick up on a few things that people have said over this great panel. It's really about that need to push ourselves, I think, not to ensure that the work that we do across these initiatives isn't just talking with those usual suspects, really about how do we find ways to push ourselves to ensure that the research is getting to the people in the need. We need to really embed the locally led adaptation principles in all of the work we do, ensure that we have inclusive decision making, I think is absolutely critical. We need to support and elevate voices from the Global South and really push the peer-to-peer learning and capacity exchange that there's so much need for. I've heard it multiple times here at the COP, and there's certainly a huge need for the ARA and the Resilience Knowledge Coalition and the partners that really are coming together within those. And we also need to listen. We need to listen to the voices from the ground, and that's part of, again, of that locally led adaptation component. But I also would say that we need to, these initiatives have a real opportunity to address the barriers that the private sector has to invest in adaptation and resilience, and really work with the people on the ground to do that in conjunction. And that's really important, because we can't always be reliant on public sector funding to come in and build resilience. So there are real opportunities for the private sector here. Of course, we know about the clock ticking, but it's also a real world of opportunity to reinvent things, and that's key. And so this could be a real, a fantastic chance for these initiatives to really guide and be the shining light within there, and provide that really robust research and that robust knowledge that the private sector needs to invest. And then finally, I would just say, echoing a bit of Salim's words, that it is true that signing up is easy, but it's absolutely critical that we move away from that 20% of adaptation and resilience funding into that much more equal 50%, and bringing adaptation and resilience, adaptation, resilience, and mitigation together as sort of equal siblings in this race to address climate change. And I think with these initiatives, we are taking a very important big step to ensuring that we are, as partners, as the hundreds of partners. So I think Aditya, you've got up to 100 partners, is that right? And we have over 60 within GRP, and Southwest North has many, ICAT has many. Ensuring that we add up to more than the sum of our parts. I think that's really critical as well. More than the whole that we are together. And this is where this opportunity exists, and we can't afford to squander it. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Nate, and a big thank you to all of you and all of you listening in online, as well as our panelists, virtual and physical. A big thank you from the Climate and Development Knowledge Network, the Resilience Knowledge Coalition, and the Adaptation Research Alliance. Have a good afternoon, and I'm sure we'll meet soon.